Hello, everybody. Hi, Doug.
Hey, Steve.
So, hi, everyone. And I'd first like to say welcome to the Research Hub podcast. Today is a truly international event because I'm dialing in from United Kingdom and Doug is in the USA. So, our goal today is to hopefully have an interesting conversation about science-backed subjects which are of interest to people in the world of fitness. Now, that might be a fitness professional, a fitness enthusiast, you name it. We're looking to have a hopefully interesting conversation about sprint intensity today. Now, just a little bit of background. Us two could talk all day long about sprint intensity, but we're hopefully not going to go on and on and on. We're going to keep it nice, clear, concise, and of interest to you, the viewer. So first things first, let's do a little introduction. So Doug, we have met only via the internet camera and social media, etc. I know that you are a facility owner. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do with sprint intensity, maybe.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Very, very excited about this. I feel like a sprint nerd. So finally, I have somebody and some of these great people to share it with. So maybe we can create some more sprint nerds. But I tell you, starting off as a school teacher, I looked more forward to the end of the day when I could work with some kids in the weight room. And I ended up quitting as a school teacher and I went full throttle in the training, and everyone thought I was crazy because I had no clientele. So why would you give up a full-time job with benefits with zero clients? And so I threw myself into the fire, and you don't start off having a ton of clients. So in between any moments I had between clients, it was read, 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 watch, watch, watch. And you take the good and the bad with everything. And I used to truly think that NFL football wide receivers, in America, these guys, they sprint, 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 right? They sprint for 6 seconds, they get a 40-second break. They sprint 6 seconds, get a 40-second break. And I'm like, man, I want to watch them train. So I created relationships with some of these guys, the best of the best. Well, then one of these guys said, why don't you have relationships with a couple of UFC fighters? Let's see how they train. And I just winged it and took a shot, and I flew out to San Luis Obispo and I watched some of these guys train where they were resting for 10 seconds instead of 40 seconds. And it lit a fire under me. And I wanted to see what I could do. And that's how going and watching UFC champion at the time, Chuck Liddell, train and his crew. And the head coach did not want me in there because he didn't want sharing his secrets.
Trade
It was a lot of
secrets.
HIIT training at the time. So of course I come back to my side of the country and I'm doing HIIT, HIIT, HIIT. And, and I'm thinking like, that's the best of the best. And down the road, we would find out there's something even more impressive that would benefit me and so many other people.
Let's not give that away yet, because I
Like,
think what
sure.
you're talking about is Sprint 8, which we will certainly go into in a great deal of detail. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Steve Barrett. I am the Global Director of Fitness Programming with Matrix Fitness. And kind of the way that the two of us have come together today is via a fantastic chap who works over many, many years with Matrix Fitness is a guy called Phil Campbell. So Phil is, I very happy to call him a mentor of mine as a person who has inspired me. But basically the relationship we have is that my job within Matrix is to take the equipment that we manufacture, design, create, and then develop the fitness programming that goes with that. And one of those programs is the Sprint 8 program that we'll absolutely be talking about. But that's how my relationship was initiated with Phil Campbell, who is the creator of the Sprint 8 program. So enough about me. We know a little bit more about you. Obviously a fighter background and also a fascination with people who exist in the world of high performance sport. Let's start with some basics. Let's just clear something up, because we're here to talk about sprint intensity, and something that a lot of people will be automatically thinking to themselves is, well, is that HIIT? Is that the
Done.
same as HIIT? Is that different from HIIT? So I just want to clear it up. And here's my definition. And I'd love to hear you add anything to this, Doug. Sprint intensity for me can be HIIT, but HIIT isn't always sprint intensity. And the way I differentiate the two things is HIIT, high intensity interval training, is generally associated by the heart rate that's achieved when you do it. So you get a high heart rate, an elevated heart rate, and people classify something as HIIT. Problem for me in that is that I can elevate my heart rate by doing things which aren't particularly fast. And the clue of what sprint intensity is in the name, sprint. So the way I differentiate the two is HIIT is very much classified around heart rate. Sprint intensity is something that forces the body to recruit or activate fast twitch muscle fibers.
Yeah.
So we're going at the body at a cellular level. We're saying to the body, we've got slow twitch fibers, we've got fast twitch fibers. The fast twitch, sometimes described as the muscle fiber of last resort. It's your fight or flight muscle fibers.
Beautiful.
Body
Beautifully
can't
said.
keeps them back. It keeps them in reserve for as and when they're required. So HIIT, high intensity interval training, heart rate related. Sprint intensity, muscle fiber specific. When we activate those fast twitch fibers, it's sprint intensity. How'd you feel about that?
I could absorb every one of your words like a sponge. Beautifully said. Yeah, I didn't know the difference when I'm watching these NFL guys, pro football players train. I'm watching these fighters train. These are the best of the best. These are guys that when I grew up as a kid, I wanted to be just like them. And I thought HIIT was, boy, I thought that was everything. But many times when you do HIIT, you don't have time to recover. So are you truly going all out? And when you were talking about running as fast as you can, the difference between slow twitch and fast twitch, I think of it as what happens if a dog's coming at me? Full blast. And I'm a wimp. I've been bitten a couple times. So if a dog's coming after me, I'm getting out of there. So you don't think about how am I going to run with my arms? How am I going to, no, it's my heart's coming out of my chest. And I'm running with everything I have. And I'm trying to tap into something like a mom trying to pick up a car when her baby's trapped underneath. It's just something, it's special. It's those fast twitch fibers, both fast twitch fibers. If you can get into both of those, wow, you've tapped into something special.
Yeah. And what we're talking about here, because at the start of the conversation, I said, the Research Hub podcast is all about talking about things which are science-backed. And Phil Campbell has spent decades putting the science behind sprint intensity. And one of the great things about sprint intensity is you can actually measure many, many elements of what goes on in the body to prove the effects of it. And those can be, I'll throw some words in here that we haven't explained yet, but telomeres, human growth hormone, testosterone, there's lots of actual chemical reactions and physiological reactions that go on when you do sprint intensity that don't happen as a result of any other type of exercise. So quite often, if I want to really condense down my explanation, it's a form of exercise that impacts the body at a cellular level.
What are we doing when we start to run a little faster and we feel fatigue? It's that, in more words, you can explain that exercise paradox, where you're trying to put the brakes on yourself, right? Whoa, I'm going too fast. Whoa, I'm jumping too high. The inner ear, we're putting the brakes on it. So why can't we go a little faster?
Yeah. You've just used a terminology there, which, I've got to say this right from the start, that we're kind of at that pioneer phase of sprint intensity. HIIT has become a really generic terminology. People on the street, ask a few people, a lot of them will know what HIIT training is. All personal trainers, group exercise instructors, coaches, they're going to know what HIIT is. But it's only just at the start of the process of people, I think, understanding the difference and the specifics about sprint intensity. And you just used a terminology there of exercise paradox. And I don't think there's a lot of people in sort of the fitness industry who necessarily have used that terminology, but it's a really interesting thing because it's kind of a primitive caveman reaction that we've all got. that, given the chance, will creep in to every sprint intensity workout that there is. Because to sum it up, it's kind of the body's way of saying, are you sure? Do you want to save some energy just in case? And it is putting those brakes on, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's, that little voice that creeps in your head when things get hard. I don't like roller coasters. So I sure as heck don't want to be thrown too high in the air. If I'm running too fast and I'm feeling fatigue, that little voice is coming in my head. Oh, you could just slow down. Oh, you don't have to jump as far. You can kind of half, um, half push yourself on this rep. And that's why I feel like a lot of also they call HIIT training, like around here, I don't know what they do in England, like Tabata training where it's like 20 on, 20 off or 20 on. You just don't have enough time to recover. So it's easier to tell yourself, just slow down on this rep. The accountability part, it's no different than I'll start training on Monday. They say that every
Well,
other day.
what I find fascinating is how it's actually possible to trigger the exercise paradox without realizing it as a coach. So I learned a few years ago that, when you're doing sprint intensity, and let's say we're doing the classic 30 seconds of work,
Yeah.
and
It's what I did for years.
somebody in the room shouts out, "Hey guys, 5 seconds to go. 4, 3, 2, 1." As soon as you heard 5 seconds,
You start to slow it
your
down.
foot off the gas, you dropped your shoulders, you went flat footed,
Yeah.
and you were no longer sprinting. You
Yeah.
were cruising through the line, but you weren't sprinting through the line. So it's actually possible for a coach with the best intentions to actually invoke the exercise paradox because they simply didn't know it was there. So actually us talking about it and bringing it up is probably a really beneficial thing, because as a coach, the way to avoid invoking it is to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Shut
Well,
up.
a lot of the people they'll be listening to this podcast have kids and they're paying a lot of money for travel ball and they're going to get timed on their testing. And one thing that Phil Campbell personally taught me, and he couldn't have been more correct and right on the spot on this one. If I'm measuring 40 yards or 40 meters, depending on what country we're in, and I have my stopwatch, right? I better I better be timing about 2 yards further than that line because 9 out of 10 are gonna start slowing down before they get to the line.
Human nature.
They don't run through, they run to. So they start
Yeah.
slowing down. All right, I see the line, I'm gonna start slowing down. And I can't tell you how many kids that I've seen that happen to, and parents like, oh, if he would just ran a little faster. And like, man, put a Gatorade bottle, put a cone a little further than that line so they can go past where that man with the stopwatch is or
Yep.
female.
Yep. 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 I mean, one of the things we're gonna go into in a little bit is some of the metrics that you can measure against. And you mentioned, the 40 meter, the 40-yard sprint, and we can time things. But actually getting people to work for the appropriate amount of time is really, really important, because
Yeah.
when we're talking about 30 seconds of work or 20 seconds of work, it's not long. And if you miss 2 or 3 seconds, that's 10% of the potential work period gone. So if you are invoking that exercise paradox and sort of losing 3 seconds at the end, that's 10%. Another thing is actually making sure that you kind of cross the line at a sprint rather than wind it up and getting going, because yet again, there's 3 seconds at the front end, 3 seconds at the other end. Suddenly you've lost 20 seconds of potential work time. So imagine that as an investment. You'd lost 20 seconds. You'd be pretty gutted.
Well said
Like
on that one.
20%, you'd be pretty gutted.
Yeah, there goes the benefits for sure.
Yeah. Let's get into some of this terminology, because we've been talking about sprint intensity and then I've been mentioning sprint 8, and I interchange the terminologies, but sprint 8 is actually a specific methodology. So let's get into talking about that, because I know that it's the method that you use and it's definitely the method that I use. There's other variables, there's other formulas that you can have for sprint intensity. But basically, sprint 8 is something which is tried and tested, and none of the numbers are there by accident, is the way I like to think about it. So I'll sum it up. It's 8 rounds, sprint intensity, all out effort for 30 seconds. Then you get to recover for 90 seconds before you do it all over again. So it's 30 seconds work, all out, 90 seconds recovery, done 8 times. And this can be done on many modalities, whether it's, your bikes, your cross trainers, treadmill, on the track, in the gym, lots of different modalities. But the formula itself hasn't happened by accident. And our friend Phil Campbell has worked on all those variables. He worked on sprint 6, sprint 9, sprint 10, sprint 15, sprint 4. And he kept coming back to 8 kind of being the magic number. Now, what's your background with working with different variables, and how have you decided that 8 and sprint 8 is the one for you?
So I started when I met Phil Campbell a little over a decade ago. I was listening to him, and I just thought to myself, again, I'm watching the best, what I thought were athletes in the world doing, 20 on, 20 off, 30 on, 30 off, 20 on, 40 off. And then eventually I saw 20 on, 10 off. So, I had been training like that for years. And then I'm listening to Phil Campbell talk about how it's 30 all out. And then instead of a minute and a half complete stop, think of it as like a minute and a half of like you're walking through a mall, you're power walking through a mall, you're bringing your heart rate back down. So you're giving yourself enough time to reload and then explode again for 30 seconds. Because in any of that other style training, there's just not enough time to reload. You don't watch the Olympics, watch a guy give all out for 100 meters, and then 30 seconds later, he goes right back to try to break the world record. There has to be time to reload in order to explode. So I'm listening to him. And he's like, "Oh, I meet him at the trade show. Who's this 60-year-old some man? I'm in my 30s and blah, blah, blah." And and at the time, I had more hair and I wasn't as gray and all that jazz. So he puts me on the Ascent trainer, which is an elliptical. Then I'm even more skeptical. I'm like, an elliptical, boy. So I do the first sprint and I don't really go all out. I think I'm going all out, right? But I don't go all out. And then a number appears. And I'm like, what does this number mean? He's like, this is how hard you worked. He goes, I began this on a track.
So
And then
that's our sweat score.
yeah, a sweat score,
That
how hard I worked over that 30-second period. So if I let up at any point, especially in the beginning, the middle, the end, and once I saw 26, 27, I did start slowing down. So then on the second one, I had even a better score. And I'm like, this is easy. And then because I went so much harder on the second one to beat the first one, my third score plummeted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so my third sprint, I was like, whoo, I didn't get enough rest. He goes, well, you're used to getting 30 seconds. That was a minute and a half, and you can't recover because you've never went all out before. And I said, where can I buy one of these machines? And I went right to a matrix salesman.
So just to clarify, that score that you were talking about, it was displayed after your 30 seconds, and it's a 1, 2, or 3-digit number, and it's effectively a metric which is measuring your power, and your speed is a priority. So when you do that sprint intensity, we're looking for speed, because the clue is in the name. So you got to be strong and you got to be fast to increase that metric. And that metric can kind of become a little bit addictive, because it's something that you can have a very personal connection with, and it's the only thing, you're the only one that can actually influence it. You can't cheat your sweat
Can't blame
score.
anyone else.
You
It's not a
genuinely
team
can't.
sport. It's
No.
you versus you. And every single sprint, this doesn't happen to me in any other, like that inner voice that we talked about earlier that creeps in your head that everyone gets. It could be, a bully is picking on you and he's picking on you, but that inner voice, what happens if I get beat up? What happens if I lose? What happens if I back down? So now I'm battling myself and this person. And I feel like sprint 8 taught me that all 8 sprints, I have to tell that inner voice, stop.
Yeah.
And what I do, and I didn't do this in the beginning, now when there's about 8 seconds to go, so you've had that minute and a half of recovery, 7, 6, when I do, no matter how much pain I'm in, how much fatigue, everything's all over my face, I look right in the mirror and I smile. And that little voice, I stand up to that little voice, and because
You got
I'm
this.
bullying myself when I'm telling myself, it's okay if you don't get
Yeah.
this score. That inner voice it's something that every single person that pushes themselves through high intensity training, especially in sprint training, especially in sprint training.
Willing to bet that when you're doing sprint 8 in a room full of people, you're the hardest working person in the room. And getting back to those numbers and, the fact that it's 8 rounds with 30 seconds work and 90 seconds recovery. If anybody ever says, I can do 9 or I can do 10, they weren't fully invested in all 8. Like you said, the first time you did it, you're a bit all over the place. The
All over the
more
place.
you do it, you see that continuity come through. If anybody says, I could have gone for 40 seconds, not 30 seconds, they weren't all out. And if anybody says, I really didn't need all 90 seconds recovery, they weren't all out. So it's a really kind of self-serving methodology in that those numbers were kind of crunched over many, many people to establish the best way of doing it and to find out what that optimum recovery is to work, to rounds, etc. So it's such a tried and tested system, and it takes a bit of getting used to. And I expect something that you do is not always expect everyone to do 8 first time.
No, no, you and I have talked before, and I agreed exactly what you said. Just getting a person to get on it. You do just one sprint with everything you have, or at least what you have that day, is something that I feel is truly special because anyone can go out for a jog. Anyone can get 10,000 steps in a day, right? But not anyone could decide, I'm going to push myself as hard as I can one time, and I'm going to do my best to recover. And if I go for one more, wow, how cool is that? You push yourself harder than you've ever pushed, not once, but twice. And if you go for a third one, I mean, you're a winner just by doing one. And those words came out of your mouth, and I couldn't have agreed with you anymore. Just when I get these clients here, they're kind of, well, what is it? What is it? And I need to make sure that when I put them on, they have not seen some of my more seasoned athletes
Sure.
do that.
Yeah.
But when you could put a 76-year on there and you watch him work his tail off, and I can put a 12-year-old on there and watch him or her work their tail off, they become a little bit more curious because, like,
Yeah.
wait, that kid can do it, that senior citizen can do it.
Let's be clear, the 12-year-old and the senior citizen are not going at the same pace. The
No.
senior citizen is doing their version of sprint, and the
Yes.
child is doing their version of, being chased by the lion. So it's an incredibly inclusive way of doing things when you accept that it's you against you.
Yeah. That's that.
And, to a certain extent, that's the great thing about the sweat score that you got, because I tend to not weaponize the sweat score. I tend to use it as almost like that little secret number in the back of my head, like a personal best that I can choose to share or I can choose to keep it a secret.
Okay.
But it's something that I can directly influence by going faster, working with more resistance. But you can only really compare sweat scores if you're dealing with like for like, because a person who weighs 45 kilos is not going to generate as much power as someone who's 115 kilos of pure muscle.
Yeah.
So sweat score is something which is that lovely personal metric that we can all work with.
I agree that, but that makes it so much fun. Different ages, different body types.
Yeah.
After getting my first machine, I mean, I now have three. I train right here on our property, beautiful home gym right on our property. So now I have three, but I started with one, and I took a composition book and I recorded names, ages, body types, numbers, averages. And after two
You told
years,
me about some success stories, and
oh, incredible. I mean,
I was welling up with one of them because you were telling me about one particular success story that you'd seen like this person's life change.
yeah, a young man that at the time I didn't have any kids. I was just known for training adults because I didn't have some beautiful facility. Parents want to take their kids to a beautiful 30,000 square foot facility or whatever you would call that over in England. And,
Big.
I began training out of an apartment and then a rental house. And I just kept working my way up to where I am now. I have everything I could ever want. But at the time, I didn't have any kids. And I had heard a story about a kid that was extremely heavy, struggled from depression. So he comes, he doesn't see any other kids. These are all adults. He's like, I don't know. So his mom says, how about I train with you as well? So his mom was his little angel. And this young man who was very overweight was going to the leading children's hospital in our state. And for whatever reason, he just was not getting the results. He had a brother that was only 1 year older, that ate worse than him, that exercised less than him, but had a six pack. So many people on here understand about body types. And so, anyway, we did a lot of high intensity sprint training, a lot, like 3 times a week. And he ended up losing over 100 pounds. And the same young man, you can't make this story up, the same young man that used to come home from school after being bullied, go in the food pantry to snack, and then actually, and whew, I've shed some tears over this story. He would literally shut the door and his mom would come home from work and she would find himself in the food pantry because that was his comfort area. But that was also the, the same area or reasoning why that contributed to him being so overweight. But he would lose over 100 pounds. He would become homecoming king. And I don't know if they have homecoming king in England,
What it
but
is, yeah. Yeah, we
most
don't, but I know what it is.
most popular. He wore the crown and he went from food pantry to weightlifting and high intensity sprint training to losing 100 pounds, becoming homecoming king. His mom would later pass 2 years later due to cancer. But if it wasn't for her, right? If it wasn't for her and it wasn't for the lifting of the weights and the high intensity sprint training, this kid's life never changes. And he's living in Hollywood now.
So, wow. Well, I mean, he may or may not know because, we all hear the word endorphins banded around, don't we? When people are talking about, that exercise buzz and getting some endorphins. But, one of the things that happens within sprint intensity is this fantastic chemical is secreted around the brain called brain derived neurotrophic factor. There's a mouthful, BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor that is almost like a superfood for brain cells. So that kid was going from having kind of a depressive state
It's
to
terrible.
this euphoric state that is quite hard to explain, but happens when you get it right. So I mean, that's just such a fantastic story. I want to just talk a little bit about how people can use this within a facility and kind of make it scalable.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I've found most interesting is I've done a lot of Sprint 8 on my own. And when you're doing it on your own, you can look like a crazy person. You are definitely going faster than anyone else in the gym. And I think that when you do it in a group, the benefits are magnified so much. And the reason I put it down to is when you do Sprint 8 in a group, it normalizes the activity because
So
other
true.
people are doing as much as you, a similar speed to you, working as hard as you, suffering as much as you,
Yeah,
committing as much as you. And what that does is it raises everybody's game.
absolutely.
It's a knock-on effect. I mean, I've run one marathon in my life,
Well,
and
that's awesome.
that's 26 miles. And I know if I'd left the house on a Sunday morning on my own to run 20, by the end of the street, I'd have probably given up. But because I did it in London with 55,000 people around me, I was dragged along because I was looking around and saying, if they can, I can. And I think that's a real kind of lesson for operators out there, that when you put people into small groups, it really changes the experience for everyone.
That's why I went from 1 to 3. I wish I could afford 20, like a big box gym, but but I'm limited on space. But I have 3 and we run 3 at a time, because I don't do any one-on-one training. It's all small group training, 3 or 4 every hour on the hour, and go, go, go. 20 minutes later, they're feeling it. And then, but the beautiful thing is, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the factors of elevated testosterone and human growth hormone, but It's crazy. I never would have done any type of cardio, especially HIIT training before you lift weights. And,
Well, let's go into that now, Doug, because you talk about the chemical reactions, and one of the programs that I've developed with for Matrix is Sprint 8GX, and Sprint 8GX has got a very specific strength and conditioning component that comes straight after the sprint intensity, and it's a very specific explosive lifting protocol. And the reason we do it after the sprint intensity is because we've got all of these elevated chemicals within the bloodstream we can profit from. So I know that you do a lot of record keeping and studies on your athletes. Just tell us a little bit about, how the sprint intensity can impact those chemical reactions.
well, some of my top kids that have graduated my Sprint 8 program, and I've only had a couple, right? I've only had two that have, I mean, we're talking top of the top, like elite athletes. I've only had two graduate all the way through all 20 levels, beginning on level 6. Well, my let's say my more top tier athletes would start like level 11. That's particularly on this machine, this hip trainer. They start, if you graduate 11, you go to 12, go to 13, and all 8 sprints have to be at this number or higher. So you're being held accountable for all 8. So, but here's the crazy part. When they first start Sprint 8, I do not have, this is just me, I do not have them lift afterwards. Okay. Once they become seasoned to it and used to it, and they no longer feel like, "Ah, I feel a little weird," because maybe they were, instead of keeping their head straight and sprinting on the machine, they were turning their head, which causes all kinds of issues going on, because you wouldn't see an Olympic sprinter sprint and go, turn their head. So because you're trying to recruit so hard on the machine, your head's moving and spinning, and and you get off there and like you're like, "Ooh, I don't know. Maybe I feel sick because I'm brand new to this." But once we start, like, I don't need 10 minutes to recover. I don't need 20 minutes to recover. I just need a couple minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. All of a sudden, what we were learning, Phil Campbell's correct. You've just recruited all this exercise induced growth hormone. You've elevated your testosterone, and you're lifting more than what you would normally lift. I've actually had kids max out on days that they've done Sprint 8. You would never do that with HIIT training. Tabata training, no one would ever do that. Muscles need oxygen, and you strip them when you do so much of that HIIT training. But with this, you're tapping into both fast twitch fibers. All of a sudden, you're gaining strength. It's almost not fair. And that's why Phil Campbell says you would fail an Olympic drug test within 30 minutes to an hour after completing all 8 sprints if you really tap into that fast twitch fiber type 1 and 2.
Because you've created it naturally within your body, by your body.
You mean you didn't pay for it?
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. You just
No, it's
worked for it.
fascinating. So, I mean, we are changing the hormone profile of not just athletes, but individuals. All individuals that participate can change their hormone profile. You are stripping away body fat and at the same time increasing lean muscle tissue. Now, put that on an advert, improve your hormone profile, drop body fat, increase lean muscle tissue. It sounds like a pretty good offer, doesn't it? And we were talking about how you run this in a small group training environment on your 3. And I love, I'm visualizing sort of that production line of 3 people, get off, get off, get off. We know it's important to do a warm up. It's important to do a cool down. From an operator point of view, this is something which I don't want to use that term production line but I am visualizing it within your facility. But from an operator point of view, this is something very different, because this is group training that can happen on the gym floor, on the cardio floor. Now, I worked on a lot of programs. I work in group exercise studios, group cycle studios. There are very few programs that I can think of that have ever taken place on cardio. So it's a pretty unique opportunity for operators, isn't it? Because a lot of people come up to the cardio and they kind of self-prescribe what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But the beauty of Sprint 8 is that it's built into most of the Matrix consoles. So you don't actually need to know the protocol yourself. You can actually just use the protocol, and you select a level, and then, well, there's 1 to 20 levels. So like I said, it's a very inclusive program. There's that very, very elite level up at level 20. And then there's absolute beginners at level 1 and plenty of steps in between. So this is a program that differs from many, many other programs because it happens on the cardio floor, which is really fascinating. But what makes it even more fascinating is the fact that you get this muscle development
It's incredible.
cardio. So give us some gems on that muscle development facilitated by cardio rather than, traditionally lifting weights.
Well, normally once the guys get done, I give them a few minutes to recover, and then we go into the weightlifting. Well, guess what? There, with all that movement, whether you're sprinting on a treadmill, whether you're using a bike, what do they call those bikes? I don't want to say
Total
the
body
wrong.
cycle.
Yes, there you go. So anything you're moving your upper body with your lower body, right, which requires more oxygen anyway. That's why I like Sprint 8 more. When you're sprinting, you're pumping your arms and your legs. You're on a bike, you're pumping your arms and your legs. Elliptical arms and legs. So you're already warmed up with that push and pull, no matter what you're doing that day.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're doing chest, shoulders, back, you're already warmed up. You're ready to go. A couple minutes of rest to get your mind right. You go over. Now we go to the weights and we do less warm up sets because we're already warmed up. And 9 out of 10 times, if my clients have eaten like they should, right, because that's always a part of this, their strength numbers, there will be significant gains. And we know in strength building and adding muscle, not adding weight, because a lot of that is not muscle. So adding strength for just 5 pounds of muscle can take a year, right? It's a slow process. So if you put trust in this process and you believe in this process, whether you want to gain weight, lose weight, bottom line is you want to get stronger and you want to add muscle. If you can tap in to recruiting those fast twitch fibers, right? And you finish the program, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and eventually 8, and you go over to lift, you will be stronger. And you have to block out people telling you, "Oh, you shouldn't do cardio before you lift weights." And yes, they're right. Besides doing a normal warm up mile or something like
We're
that,
not
slow
doing
twitch,
cardio. We're doing sprint intensity cardio.
it's different. There's no other cardio that's going to recruit exercise-induced growth hormone, raise your testosterone levels, let your body maximize itself. I get so passionate because it's like, we don't know. And I didn't know until just over a decade ago. And now I'm almost 50.
I once saw a conversation between the great Michael Johnson, 400-meter, 200-meter athlete, and Usain Bolt. And Johnson was like, are you ever going to have a go at my world record for the 400 meters? And Usain was like, it's way too far for me. Way, way, way too far for me. So, you've got these sprinters with these incredibly ripped, defined bodies.
My favorite type.
Who are doing really short bursts of activity. And cardio is generally associated with the longer, the better. Work for a long, long time, get longer, keep going, go further. We're not asking people to go beyond 20 minutes in total for this sprint intensity workout, of which they only did 8 times 30 seconds.
4
of work.
minutes. That's it.
So from an operator point of view, it's an incredibly economic way of using your facility and your equipment, because just like I'm visualizing you with your production line of people coming through,
That's what it
3 at a
looks like.
time, if you use the cardio equipment specifically for that purpose, it's an incredible way of actually utilizing that cardio floor to genuinely change people's physique and physiology.
When are we going to get out of 1,200 calories, 30 minutes of cardio slow, and year after year after year, right? We say, why is my body not changing? You have to change your
You haven't
program.
changed. You haven't stimulated it.
Yeah. And my wife, she coaches online and she coaches in person. And her main, 99% of her clients are women. And she can relate because my wife's had kids. She had gained weight. anything a woman in her 30s or 40s has gone through, my wife can relate. Eating, like she heard it from me from years with my clients, and now she's really getting it as well. It's like, you have to eat, you have to strength train, you have to make changes. And I love when she has some of her clients do Sprint 8, because it's funny, because they're like, Sprint, I don't want to do what Doug's clients do. And, but why not? Because what you're doing has not been working. So challenge yourself, right? Walking into the gym for the first time or getting a trainer is a huge step, right? You know, whether you're doing it with a trainer or without, trying something new is a huge step. So the very beginning of this conversation, you said, Doug, you suggested, what happens when they just do a high level sprint for the first time? They're a winner. They're a winner, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's,
And your wife, yourself, me, we practice what we preach.
yeah,
So a lot of trainers say to me, "Oh, I've seen what you do, but how do I start? How do I get going?" Well, earlier on we said it's okay to start with 2 sprints. You're much better off doing 2 high quality sprints, progressing to 3, 4, 5, than having a cruising experience, which isn't really sprint intensity. So when trainers ask me, what's the first step? What's my biggest tip? I always say practice what you preach. You've got to do it yourself. You've got to try it yourself. And I've sat down and I've spent time with Phil before I got into doing it myself. And then I started working on the Sprint 8 GX program. And I said to myself, do you know what? I need to experience this for myself. So back
yeah,
in 2022, I did my first proper sort of 3 to 4 times a week regime where I made myself do it. I only tell you this because it's what I tell the trainers, and you've already said that they've tried everything else and it didn't make a difference. So what makes a difference? Well, let me tell you, I've tried everything. Over the years, 30, 35 plus years in the fitness industry, I've tried every trend, every novelty, every piece of
yeah,
equipment,
yeah.
and Sprint 8 is the thing that's made the most radical, rapid change to my body in all those years. Without a doubt. So my advice to trainers is always to try it and to practice what you preach. So before you start asking clients to do it yourself. When I started in 2022, I measured my sweat score, and I know what it was then and I know what it is now, and that's what motivates me to keep moving and to keep doing it, because the progress has slowed down, admittedly, but I'm still nudging that sweat score up time after time. And as a 56-year-old guy, I can't think of many things that in a 2-year period would have changed my body so, safely and effectively. Well, I've got to wrap it up now, Doug. I think it's safe to say that sprint intensity and specifically Sprint 8, as far as I'm concerned, it complements everything and conflicts with
Everything.
nothing. It complements everything and it conflicts with nothing. So whatever other types of activities you're asking your body to do, there's a pretty strong possibility that adding sprint intensity to your training protocols is going to be a good thing to do.
It's time for everyone out
Absolutely.
there.
And we are the pioneers, and we want everybody else to get, I want this to be as much part of the fitness vocabulary as, HIIT training is, and cardio and strength training, etc. So, with people like you out there, Doug, waving the flag and encouraging people to just try it and to see what happens, I think we're going to be going in the right direction.
It
So
works.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm obviously so grateful to Phil Campbell for putting us together through our enthusiasm for Sprint 8. And Doug, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us here today on the Research Hub.
Thank you. I want to thank Phil Campbell, and I want to thank Matrix for everything. I mean, changed my life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, we just want to make it possible for people to live a happier, fitter, healthier life. So once again, Doug, thank you so much, and keep sprinting.
Thank you.